Welcome back, everyone, to our IT Mythbuster series. I'm excited to be back with my good friend, Suresh GP, to talk about what I think is going to be a great topic for us today. We're going to talk about observability and the myth that, or the statement that we're going to explore and potentially myth to be busted, is that observability is the magic wand for an SRE.
That's an excellent point.
Welcome, Suresh. Excited to be back with you today. This is a great topic for you specifically because you have been one of the world's leading educators on the topic of both SRE and in general, and now observability. So tell us a little bit about your background in those spaces before we jump into our topic today.
Thank you so much, Mike. It's always a pleasure to kind of stay connected. So for viewers, this is our 14th episode of IT Mythbuster. So just a little bit of background about myself. I run TaUB Solutions as the managing director in India, Singapore, and the US. I've had overall 22 years experience. Started off as a software developer, then moved on to IT service management, IT operations, doing a lot of consulting, coaching on DevOps, site reliability engineering, and observability. I've been a co-author of the Site Reliability Engineering Practitioner Workshop with DevOps Institute, as well as the newly launched course of Observability Foundation. But to be honest, my biggest aha moment is just solving real-world problems for our clients, implementing SRE and observability. But as you rightly said, people think that SRE or observability is the new magic wand, and they think that when you apply this, everything becomes, it's a panacea. So it is not true. But I'll wait for you.
Why don't we maybe start by having you explain to people, because these have been both around for a little while, but they are new to a lot of people out there. So can you talk to people really quickly about what is SRE? What is an SRE and what is observability?
Right, that's a great question. So back in the days, if you remember, site reliability engineering was founded by Google in 2003. So we are about 20 years later, we are talking and debating about it because in the erstwhile days, Google was focused on scalability part of it. How do we run systems in a grander scale? Now with microservices, you can spin off pods just like that. So the scalability was a bigger concern on the part. So today, site reliability engineering focuses on two key elements. Reliability of the systems, keeping the systems up and running 24/7, 365 days without any performance degradation. Because everybody right now is ruthless. If you have an unplanned outage, if you have a slowness in the systems, right? Where, for example, you're watching a football match and suddenly you see some latency, people just shout and scream on top of the voice. So people are expecting so many things to be available around the clock, but it's going to be very difficult because considering the fact that so much of distributed systems in place, you need to start designing your systems and applications, infrastructure in a manner that is kind of more sustainable. So the way site reliability engineers are looking at is right from the time that you start your requirements, right? When we talk about non-functional requirements, because what your functional requirements are coming from features, from developers in terms of user stories, but we're also kind of looking at non-functional requirements like availability, capacity, continuity, security, all of those stuff. It's very important, like what we term as fit for use, right? The fit for purpose was the features, and fit for use, the warranty aspects had to be thought in mind and ensure that the final product or service that is being delivered is fit for purpose and fit for use. So in reality, you're not only looking at utility of the systems, but warranty of the systems. Now, easy said than done, because there's so many moving parts. Now, many of the times what happened is the development team put out the whole stage build process and deployed, and they forget about the whole thing. And on the other side of the spectrum, there are some changes that are failed, some of those unplanned outages, and it's like a mess. We don't know what was the reason, and you have a little bit of monitoring and stuff, and it's just a maze. So we needed someone who could start looking at the end-to-end value chain and see how do we bring in those elements which will shift left, understand what we call as the wisdom of production. Something broke. There has to be a legitimate reason why it broke, and have a conversation with the development team to bring some level of instrumentation so that the next time it's not a black box anymore. So we are obviously trying to improvise our system thinking. So in a plain layman time, there's two reasons why site-reliable engineering is important. Number one is to look at the end-to-end user experience. So in the earlier days, we talked about service level agreements, which is like a watermelon syndrome. Everything looks green outside, but it's bleeding red. Now we are shifting gears towards service level objectives, which is more towards user experience and trying to look at the user journey map. This is going back to our earlier discussion of value streams. You look at the entire touch point of the customer experience and see how it's meaningful around that. So that's the whole world of how SRE looks in reality, focusing on reliability, resilience, and user experience.
So SRE, if I heard what you're saying correctly, is not just for the infrastructure engineer. It goes much broader. And again, I love that statement you made. It's about that shift left, right? We want to start to bring warranty and those non-functional requirements earlier on in the development cycle and make the developers a part of the reliability conversation. So it's much broader than just a single silo, but the entire value stream of how we navigate and think about our systems in reality.
Right. And one of the problems is the left hand doesn't know what the right hand does. So the development team is still focused on agile and DevOps, and the infrastructure team is looking at operations and stuff like that. So it's a kind of a conduit. If you look at like a seamless transition from the time that you kind of commit a code till deploy and then post deployment and stuff like that, but easy said than done. Now I'll shift a little bit gear because the next question was on observability. One of the problems is we do a lot of monitoring. The monitoring includes your infrastructure monitoring, your application monitoring. You define your thresholds, you look at your warning, you look at your notifications, you look at an incident. That's all great. But we have to understand that monitoring cannot cover everything. So you will still have some blind spots. And in spite of having your sophisticated tools and things in place, you will still struggle. So one of the things that we believe is first to understand a little bit about the aspect of the three pillars of monitoring, right? So we kind of look at metrics, events, and traces, right? So for example, in a traditional world, when there is an incident or a P1 incident happens, you kind of do a root cause analysis, have a bridge call, find this out. We're very reactive in many of those terms. And today what's happening is a lot of our clients whom we speak to, they're saying, Suresh, we don't want to have incidents at the first place. With all your sophisticated monitoring in place, we really want to get this around, like kind of the zero touch, no incidents coming out. Come on, guys, you should be able to do it. You have the level of sophistication of tools and stuff like that. But that's where the SRE needs something like observability, right? So one is the aspect of, okay, I know my monitoring logs, I understand this stuff, but beyond that, how do I shift gears? So observability focus on these parameters or metrics, events, logs, and traces. So today, in many of these cloud native applications, we have different things that could go, a lot of API calls, web services and stuff. It's just a maze. I mean, it's a stateless protocol. We don't know how things are working. So in the earlier world, used to have a single unified CMDB or CMS that I could have understand my upstream, downstream interfaces. But today, with the level of rapid changes that are happening in the systems, I have no visibility of what is creating the problem with that particular stage. So the observability is trying to understand the root cause of an issue. So when monitoring is a kind of a symptom of telling something is broken, it doesn't tell you exactly what is broken. So like the problem management, you can have one too many reasons. So observability is trying to figure it out based on historical experiences and things, what else could go wrong, and being more predictive so that you don't spend a lot of time in doing this experimental way of causal resolution.
So it does seem like you're trying to see the future with observability. You're trying to predict what's going to happen, right? So it does kind of feel like if you're an SRE and your job is to make your system reliable, it feels like observability is a magic wand, right?
Well, that's a great point to hear, but then the reality is that people cannot jump into observability immediately. There are a lot of prerequisites, in my opinion, that you need to keep in place. There's a lot of hygiene
Okay.
factors that you have to do. I tell observability is an accelerator, but it's not going to solve every problem. So the question is really starting with the 4 golden signals of monitoring, where it's either could be saturation, it could be utilization, it could be latency, it's going to be the errors that you're tracking. That's the basic things, because if you don't have your monitoring 4 golden signals at least in place, observability is a distant dream.
Right.
And also that we need to understand that there's no one size fits all. I know a lot of people think that the tools will solve the problem. I always say the fool with the tool is still a fool. So we really need to understand, what are we trying to accomplish with observability? What's the why? Because that's a bit of a problem. If you ask SRE and observability to 3 different people or 5 different people, you get 5 different answers. So first, get a consensus of what are we trying to accomplish and how SRE and observability is going to accelerate your business outcomes. And then take that small incremental approaches to do that. So in my opinion, I think observability definitely accelerates the whole aspect to move forward. There's a lot of groundwork to do, and it's not always about tools. It's also about people and culture change. So if you don't focus on that being evolved as part of SRE, we're going to bleed. We'll have a lot of sophisticated tools. I'm doing currently an assessment with at the Fortune 500 company, and they have so many people doing SRE in different departments, and I'm not able to realize, because everybody looks at SRE from their own perspective, and they brought me in as a consultant from TaUB Solutions to look at, can you please standardize this, because it's such a mess going around the whole space. How can you help that? So to your point, that observability is a great place to look forward. It helps you. There's a lot of groundwork to do before you can kind of do that, and it's never could be a magic wand.
All right. So it sounds like you've just busted our myth. Observability is not a magic wand. It's a great benefit. It's an accelerator. It's definitely something we should be striving to leverage, but we've got to go into it with the right mindset. We can't think that it's going to solve all of our problems. It's going to be able to predict the future for us. We've got to really view it as more of an incremental step on our journey towards the nirvana that we're hoping to get out of our IT landscape someday.
Right. And I just wanted to make a part, and this is a plug just to get people to understand what we are talking about. We have a dedicated workshop where we kind of go through this in detail. And I would strongly say, if you are an SRE that you want to kind of step up your journey towards becoming a specialist, I would say these are the things that we actually talk about in the Observability Foundation certification. Basically, the culture. Remember, I talked about if you don't have the people culture, it's going to be a bit of a problem. The 3 pillars of metrics, events, and traces that we talk about, including distributed tracing. And you know very well that there is a whole push towards open telemetry. So irrespective of what tools are you using, and how can you bring in that open telemetry to collect information from all different sources and get a holistic understanding of how we can do this whole observability. So we are really talking into much more detail of full stack observability, doing distributed tracing, and what's your organization maturity in the journey of moving towards observability. And it's going to be a great workshop, just not because I've been part of a co-authoring on this one, but every organization that we talk to is telling that this is absolutely needed for an SRE, because we have understood the pain areas of monitoring. We've got things in place. Now, please help us to take to the next step of making that observability a powerful weapon and accelerate it for us to reduce toil, improve the reliability, making sure that we have better control on an end-to-end ecosystem. So from that particular perspective, I think there's a whole lot of merit in how we see observability. So while I definitely think that observability is not a magic man, but there is a lot of merit that you would want to leverage if you are going to be an SRE.
So Suresh, you obviously, that foundation certification, that observability certification you're talking about, would be a great thing for anyone in an SRE role to sit through to help continue to develop and grow their career. But it's coming from the DevOps Foundation. So are there other roles beyond SRE that would get value out of an Observability Foundation certification?
Absolutely. I think one of the things we have seen interest is about from performance engineering team. So it could be a performance testing team who would want to look at what's the new big
Oh, I
bang,
love
because
that. Yeah.
how am I going to do regression testing, and how much things are in cloud native. So that's another kind of person who's probably interested. The other person that was interested is the CIO by himself, because they want to say that how can I ensure reliability is on top priority? Because I was talking to one of my clients is right now flown from Manila to the US just because there's a problem of SRE that needs to be addressed. So it's getting a lot more visibility at a board level, Mike. So it's going to be, I would say, anybody in the value chain, whether it's a developer, a tester, a QA, infrastructure specialist, a service desk, a project manager, or service management person, you would love this, because if you understand that you are in a position to solve real world problems, I think you'll love this, because it's aimed to look at an end-to-end value chain, look at the holistic understanding of logs, tracers, metrics, and trying to identify how can we prevent some things once for all. So I would say that it could go beyond just a foundation of DevOps people, could to anybody in the value chain who's really interested to improve reliability of the system.
Yeah, it sounds like even as you could go as far as to say a business relationship manager, or maybe even more ideally, a digital product manager might get tremendous value out of understanding the broader scope and culture of observability and how they could bring that to life for their digital products and increase the overall reliability of the digital products that they're bringing to market. So I love that. So thank you for sharing all that, Suresh. And I think we're at our time for today. It sounds like our myth has been busted. Observability is not a magic wand for an SRE, but it is a really valuable tool in your toolkit. So, and for much more than just SREs, as we just heard. So with that, I'll thank our audience for joining us for today's IT Mythbuster session number 14. And thank you, Suresh, for sharing your expertise on SRE and observability today.
Thank you so much, Mike. Always a pleasure. Folks, thanks for listening to us. And if you have any hot questions on your mind, post it on your comments and we'll pick it up in our next episode of IT Mythbusters with Mike and Suresh. Thank you so much, and been signing off for today.